Let's move over and talk about the other piece of news that happened early this week. According to NFL insider Paul Kahersky, Titans wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins has a strained knee and will be out of action for the next 4 to 6 weeks, which will sideline Hopkins for the entire preseason and potentially the beginning of the first or second week of the regular season. Does this rule out any chance of a potential Treylon Burks trade to the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Yeah, I believe it does. I believe for right now, at least it does. If something happens and DeAndre Hopkins comes back sooner rather than later, things could change. But if the Steelers were looking at a Treylon Burks trade, it was going to happen later in training camp. It would be at a point where the Titans have given up on Burks. They're ready to move on. The Steelers are just looking for another option, seemingly to be another Quez Watkins, Marquez Callaway, who just signed with the Saints. Another Des Fitzpatrick, a name like that, a guy who could come in here and just fill a role bottom of the depth chart, has some upside. And Treylon Burks has obviously plenty of upside. Now the Titans are going to look at it and say, injuries happen. They have a lot of options. And that's the thing, is that the door is still open because you have so many options. But at the same time, you lose a piece like that, Treylon Burks is going to move up the depth chart. It's harder to get rid of those guys. That's where I kind of see this becoming blurry for the Steelers, is if you look at it and say he was available, there was a strong shot. I think that shot has taken a pretty big hit just because the Titans are going to utilize Treylon Burks. They're going to get more looks at him. I mean, if DeAndre Hopkins comes back by week 1 and Treylon Burks is still on the trading block, in my eyes, Treylon Burks is really bad, like really, really bad. And at that point, if you're the Steelers, are you really looking to make that move? So I believe that this definitely hinders the Steelers' attempts at Treylon Burks. And for right now, I would put that on the side, maybe off the table.
Yeah, whenever I looked at the injury, and as soon as it happened, you posed this question. You're like, "All right, we're going to talk about this," and I was like, "Well, they do have Tyler Boyd, they do have Calvin Ridley, and
Yeah.
Hopkins is supposed to be back early in the season, so there really still isn't a dire need to keep Treylon Burks." But you're right. At the same time, you look at where the Steelers are at. They lose a wide receiver in Roman Wilson. Now there's a need for another wide receiver. Tennessee loses DeAndre Hopkins. There's a need for another wide receiver to fill that spot. They just happen to have him on the roster and a young player in Treylon Burks. So yeah, it makes it harder. It doesn't close the door in my eyes on a Treylon
No.
Burks trade, because if there was a lack of interest all summer long, just because somebody's going to miss training camp, and a veteran, mind you, is going to miss training camp, somebody who really doesn't need the reps, it's going to obviously slow him down to start the season because he's not going to be able to ramp up. But mentally, he knows where he's at, is DeAndre Hopkins. So it's not as big of a deal as maybe a Roman Wilson missing all of training camp. But at the same time, I agree with you. There's going to be reps to be had, and Treylon Burks is going to take them. They're going to hope that he takes them and runs with them so they have a dominant 1 through 4.
Yeah, I'll toss this out too. An alternative perspective is you're right. It doesn't close the door, and if there's a chance that Treylon Burks comes out here, looks good during the preseason, and kind of increases his stock. And that's another aspect of this, is the Titans aren't going to hold on to a gunner, a guy who's just going to play special teams, if they're able to get maybe a 4th round pick for him. And that's right now, that's not what the case is. He's going for a 6th rounder. You're just kind of looking to get rid of him. If you can make that a 4th, if he could climb up the ladder that much, the interest peaks, maybe teams start calling. I could see the Tennessee Titans saying, yeah, you just boosted everything. That's great for us. Sounds good. The Steelers, I don't know if I'm giving up a 4th round pick for Treylon Burks, but right now, compared to 2.5 weeks from now, is a totally different game. And we know the Steelers love to give up those middle round draft picks, man. They love to dish them out. So if it does happen, I could see that making its way over there.
Yeah, I mean, that's leaves a lot on this next couple of weeks. What does
Yes.
he look like with the ones? Because that's presumably where he's going to be playing the rest of the preseason.